All right, my people. Saw it coming. You know, I had to talk about this. So I was originally going to do, I'm actually going to tie this into Joseph Remembers. I was going to do a Joseph Remembers where, where World Wrestling Federation became World Wrestling Entertainment and Steve Austin walking out and stuff like that, both of which happened 20 years ago in May, June 2002. I'm just going to marry it all into talking about Sasha and Naomi. All right, so everyone knows by now. Anybody who watches wrestling knows by now that last Monday, Sasha Banks and Naomi, they were supposed to be part of a six-woman match to determine the number one contender for Bianca Belair's uh, Raw Ladies Championship, and Sasha wasn't having it. Naomi wasn't having it. And despite having a whole bunch of discussions about it and being like told to pretty much just shut up and just do the damn match, both of them just walked the fuck out. Like before they were matched, and when they were advertised to go on last, and now it sucks kind of that women going on last is like now it's like par for the course now. It's like used to be special. Remember that like 20 years ago? Like remember that when Lita and Trish went on last and was like holy shit. Now it's like women are going on last. Meh. You know what I mean? Like so I don't know, just a little aside. So and in the week since that happened, there's been a lot of speculation surrounding it about how Banks and Naomi felt like they weren't being treated right. How they were the women's tag team champions just because they were the only ones who were willing to hold those titles, and a number of podcasters. Solo Monster in particular, he's the only one I really listen to. Sometimes good mic work, I'll listen to him, but the thing with Greg is that he tends to, and I don't know if I don't know if it's just a habit of his, but he tends to insert his social and political beliefs into a lot of his commentaries. Not a lot, like 10%. And I don't really care for that. And that he could have the same kind of social and political beliefs and philosophies that I have, and I would still not like it. Solo is different. Solo Monster. I just call him Solo. Solo is a little different. Solo actually talks about the wrestling event, and so I was listening to Solo Monster talk about this, and he made a great point in that the women's tag team championships never meant anything. Like, they didn't mean anything when they were introduced 3 years ago at WrestleMania 35, and they never meant anything since, like, at all. And it was Sasha Banks and Bayley who, like, really wanted that. They really wanted that. You know what I mean? And then they both lost those tag team championships to the Iconics. And then that was when Sasha Banks ran out of WWE for the first time, along with Bayley. They both took time off, and they both didn't know if they wanted to return, and they were both kind of convinced to come back and return. And since then, Sasha Banks has enjoyed a couple decent runs as either SmackDown or Raw Ladies Champion. Same with Bayley. Same with Naomi. Naomi's been champion for a bit, I think, a couple times in the last few years. These women are not being treated like shit. They're being treated like they should be treated. Okay, and that doesn't sound right. I know that, but I'll get into that later on. But here's what you're gonna expect. So you sit down, relax, get yourself some coffee, get yourself something to eat, get yourself an adult beverage or 3, because I'm going to be talking for a while, okay? Like with any event of this nature, I'm going to be as objective and as non-biased as possible, okay? I'm not gonna I'm gonna go to bat for whatever sides I feel like I need to go to bat for. Okay? And he just heard me explain a very, very abridged history of Sasha and Naomi's tenure in WWE for the last number of years. And Sasha, in my opinion, well, not in my opinion, let's keep describing their past and their history. I'll start with Naomi, then we'll go with Sasha. So Naomi has been in WWE for the better part of 15 years, okay? She was in NXT in 2010. Remember that, when it was the game show? And it was like really poorly booked, and it was like pretty much like the biggest joke ever. And then she became one of the Funkadactyls with Brodus Clay, and she had another, and her and Cameron, who famously on Tough Enough said that her favorite match was between Alicia Fox and Melina Perez, and Austin was like, "What the fuck?" Yeah, that Cameron. So and then over time, when there was a push for women to be taken more seriously and not focus on, for them to focus more on match quality and storylines and stuff like the dudes do instead of sex appeal, that's when she started getting a good push. I remember when she came out, I went to a couple of shows in Orlando. She was really big in Orlando because she was like part of NXT, big, back when they relaunched NXT, the NXT Black and Gold. She was very over. I remember when she came in, I think just to do a match or something at the 2016 Royal Rumble. It was her versus somebody, and she got a massive big pop. Same at WrestleMania 33 when I was there, and at Raw after it. I think she was at both of those shows. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember the place blowing up for her. So, and over the last 5 or so years, Naomi's also won her fair share of women's titles, okay? It's the same with Sasha Banks. Sasha Banks was in the first ever women's Hell in the Cell match against Charlotte Flair. It was a match that was, to me, it was completely organic, because I despise everything about Charlotte Flair. I think she's completely overrated. She's like all the other Flair kids. None of them can perform. Reed did have a chance, but unfortunately he passed and is not with us anymore. Rest in peace, Reed. David Flair never had a fucking chance, and Charlotte Flair doesn't have a chance. She's completely overrated. She sucks on the mic. She's met in the ring. Okay? And Sasha will tell you the exact same thing. But she was part of that program. She had an awesome title run alongside Bayley, where they were, where they reunited, and they were doing really good heel work during the opening years of the pandemic, two some odd years ago, and for a good 6 or so months, like Bayley and Banks were like the only reason to watch like any WWE, like just to see what kind of crazy shit they would do next. You know what I mean? To me, anyways. You know what I mean? So she has nothing to complain about either. Now let's get into, so that's the history of them both. They both had a really good tenure. They were both, in my opinion, taken care of very well over the last 5 or so years. They have nothing to complain about. They can't sit there and say, I've been in WWE since 2014 and I haven't gotten a single title shot. If that was the case for both of them, then they would have every right to walk out, and I would be right there on their side. I would go to bat for them no matter what. And I will talk about how this isn't going to change anything, by the way. This isn't going to change shit. Alright? But if you want to consider their history, what do they have to complain about? You tell me. You tell me about all the history they've made and all the cool moments they've had. Sasha Banks walking out for the first time in 2019, comes back in 2020 and gets title shots and wins the title, gets rewarded for it. You tell me how that works out. You tell me how that shakes out. You know? So here's what some of them say. Is that here's what some fans and podcasters and other whatever wrestling content makers are saying about Sasha and Naomi walking out, and that's where they go to bat for them. So people are going to bat for them because they're treating Sasha and Naomi walking out like it's a stand for solidarity. You know what I mean? Like, it's them, it's them showing WWE what they mean with their feet. You know what I mean? Saying, yo, okay, well, you want to put us in bullshit six woman matches so that you can put over your current champions, Ronda Rousey and Bianca Belair. Bianca, who I've always been a big fan of. Ronda, who I've never been a big fan of. That's coming from me, by the way, not them. And that's them disagreeing. Them saying, you know what? Okay, we don't want any of this. Bye. You know what I mean? And that's fine for them to do that. That's their own prerogative. That's their careers. I'm not going to sit here and say that they did anything wrong or right or whatever. However, is that unprofessional? Absolutely. Did they need to do things in that way? No. Will that change the course of WWE and get WWE to consider how their performers think about the storylines they're placed in and their role on TV shows and stuff like that? Fuck no. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And yeah, and that's what they need to understand. Okay, that's what they need to understand. So to anyone who is delusional enough to believe that these two young ladies showed solidarity by walking out, y'all are out of your mind. Okay? WWE doesn't care about anybody except Roman, Charlotte Flair, Brock Lesnar to some extent, not as much now as 10 years ago, and possibly Ronda Rousey, and maybe the Usos, maybe the Usos. Okay, with WWE can easily replace Sasha and Naomi with other women's tag team, with a different women's tag team, as few of them as they are on the Raw and SmackDown roster. I think they're gonna give. I think the titles that they're gonna have a tournament or something like that, or just even a match between Shayna Baszler and Natalya Neidhart versus Nikki Cross and Piper Niven. I'm not calling her Doudrop for the tag titles, and there you go. Then they're going to win that, and it's over. And it's funny, WWE even knows this because, like 24 hours after they walked out on last week's Raw, WWE released a statement saying that Sasha and Naomi didn't feel safe with a couple of the with a couple of the women that they were going to work with, and so they walked out. And yeah, that was WWE literally saying, like, doing to them what JR and Vince McMahon did to Austin after Austin walked out 20 years ago. And only WWE took this one even further because this was, in fact, a little bit more heinous than what Austin did. I'm going to compare the two in a little bit, but let me just finish saying what I want here. So, yeah, like days after, WWE pulled all of Naomi and Sasha's merch off of WWEshop.com. That sucks. I should have bought a couple things because then it could have sold it back for like a lot. But whatever, it's fine. Took them off the roster online on their websites and stuff like that, on their socials and other stuff like that. So yeah, that was with the repercussions. Now, let's compare this to Steve Austin walking out 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, Steve Austin, he was just as upset with how WWE was doing things with his character, the same way that Sasha and Naomi were about their characters. In fact, it was actually 20 years ago to the day. Probably not to the day, but it was roughly 20 years ago where Steve Austin went on Bite This. That was WWE's it was like their. It was very similar to what Raw Talk is now, if they even have that, or Talking Smack back in the day, to where performers come on and they talk about some of the stuff they talk about is kayfabe, some of the stuff they talk about is not kayfabe, and in this particular episode of Bite This, it was not kayfabe at all. Austin said, and I quote, "I don't like the way my character is going. I don't like the way this whole damn company is going. I think it's a crock of shit." And yeah, and he said that live on a show. And so what they were going to do with Austin is they were going to have him against Brock Lesnar in a King of the Ring qualifying match. They were going to have both of them qualify to be the O2 King of the Ring. And originally, they were going to have Austin lose to Brock Lesnar in the 2002 King of the Ring tournament at the pay-per-view. Well, after hearing what Austin said about how he doesn't like how his character is being booked and he doesn't like the way that WWE's direction is going, probably because he was 38 years old and he didn't want to, and he was kind of intimidated about Orton and Lesnar and Cena and Batista coming in, Maybe it was something like that, but he actually has a different perspective on it, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But McMahon said, "Okay, you want to talk shit like that? All right, well, on the Go Home Raw before King of the Ring, I believe, you're going to just lose to Lesnar in a qualifying match on free TV." Austin didn't like that. And the week after he beat Ric Flair to have Ric Flair become his personal servant for the June 10th 02 episode of Raw, he left when he was advertised on the June 10th 2002 episode of Raw. What makes it different is that Austin didn't walk out in the middle of that show. In fact, he had a really long conversation with Vince McMahon the night before. And he said to McMahon, change the booking of me and Lesnar for that qualifying match, or else I'm not going to appear on June 10th. And McMahon said, no, you talked bullshit about what I'm doing on Bite This, so guess what? If you don't work that match, then you can go into business for yourself and it's your funeral. Well, Austin went into business for himself and he walked away. And he reflects on that as early as 2003 when he came back to work his retirement program with The Rock. He released there was a DVD that was released called The Stone Cold Truth. And I think a book of the same title. And in it, he says, walking out on the June 10th episode of Raw was the worst decision I ever made in my entire life. So, that's the comparison. And someday when Sasha Banks is in her mid-30s, and she's getting there, she's I think 31, 32 right now, which is crazy. I think she's 30. She's going to reflect on walking out here and saying how it really sucked for me to walk out in this regard, okay? Now, here's the question that's on everyone's mind. Is WWE going to bring back Naomi and Sasha Banks? My answer, and I'll actually my answer is yes. Why is that? Because here's what happened after Austin left. So after Austin walked out 20 years ago, WWE had a show called Confidential. You all remember that. That's where they had shoot interviews. I loved that show so much. I looked forward to that more than any of the shows. I remember I would sit and I would actually try to get out of work early so I could watch Confidential, because I just loved the shoot interviews they had. On Confidential, they had a series of shoot interviews with JR and Vince McMahon, and they publicly buried Austin. They said, yeah, this dude, JR said It was like watching John Wayne walk away from a gunfight. You never saw it coming, right? And JR sounded legitimately hurt and heartbroken to see his best friend leave. And McMahon too, because McMahon said, here's somebody who practically saved us from getting destroyed by WCW in the late 90s, and he just walked away, so he's not coming back, because he did a disservice to everybody involved. What happened 6 months what happened 6 months later? 6 months later, here's what happens to Austin 6 months later. 1, he gets booked in a match at No Way Out 2003 where he beats the shit out of his former employer, Eric Bischoff. Okay? Stuns the dude like 8 times. Alright? Stuns the dude 8 times. I think gave him a receipt and bloodied Bischoff the hard way. Okay? 2, gets put in a really fun, like, in a program that made you want to tune in every week against one of his favorite opponents of all time, The Rock, who was in his best gimmick ever, the Hollywood gimmick, to main event at WrestleMania fucking 19. And for that to be Austin's like final match, his retirement match, essentially his retirement match. I'm not counting the thing where he comes back to beat the shit out of Kevin Owens. That wasn't really a match. It was fun to watch, but that wasn't his comeback match. If that was his comeback match, he would have done a few more matches before and after. So my boy was rewarded for walking out, essentially. Now, here is the big difference between Sasha and Naomi walking out and Austin walking out. So when Austin walked out of WWE, WWE had just recently, 1 year to the day almost, where they purchased WCW's library, right? And that was where they still want to win over fans from WCW and from ECW, because both of those organizations are out of business. People like to think that WWE kind of sealed the deal when it came to its success as an organization 20 years ago in 2002. That is not the point. That is not the case at all. WWE could not phone things in 20 years ago the way they can now. Okay? Meaning, WWE can get away with treating any performer they want on their roster like absolute garbage shit. And they know that these individuals on that roster will not care. Okay? Because if one walks out, another can walk right in. Okay? WWE can make 2 more women exactly like Sasha and Naomi, who can appeal to the same kind of fans, can work the same kind of matches, and can do the same kind of, and who can do pretty much the exact same things, give or take a few aspects of their character that Sasha and Naomi can do. Was WWE able to create another Steve Austin in 2002? Or in the early 2000s? Fuck no. Nope. They couldn't even try. They couldn't even try. That's how larger than life Austin was. Because Austin, he represented the everyman, right? But he was also larger than life, because he was doing larger than life things that we all wish we were doing. None of us can say that about Sasha and Naomi. And now that WWE is a much bigger platform, a much bigger organization than it was 20 years ago, WWE doesn't need to worry about bringing back Sasha Banks and Naomi, but they will do it anyways. They will do it anyways because they know that there's another organization called All Elite Wrestling, and to some extent NWA and Impact and Game Changer Wrestling and Ring of Honor. All these other wrestling organizations are now just as relevant to the wrestling fans' world as WWE is. So That's why I think WWE will bring back Sasha and Naomi, but it's going to take a lot of effort on WWE's part. So now, but it's like I said, WWE is a much different organization than it was 20 years ago. So it's not completely clear. I'm not going to say it's 100% certain that WWE was going to bring back Sasha and Naomi, or that they're going to actually say, okay, guys, we get it. Y'all walked out because you think we were treating you really poorly. That makes perfect sense. Let's work something out, and let's try to make our relationship way better. This way we can see y'all in our Hall of Fame in 10, 15 something years. You know what I mean? Or get you guys to, do what Molly Holly, Nora Greenwald's doing backstage. That kind of stuff. WWE wants that. They want that from a lot of their performers. They look to the future. They always look to the future when it comes to these to their men, to the guys, to the people on their roster. Doesn't matter what gender, what sex they are. You know what I mean? WWE knew that. That's why you see all these people who were used to be big players in WWE 20-something years ago, now working backstage. You know what I mean? What do you think? WWE doesn't see that in women like Sasha and Naomi, or Bayley, or Alexa Bliss? Of course they do. So yeah, that is, I'm not crying or anything, I'm just itchy. So that's the ultimate comparison I have between Sasha and Naomi walking out versus Austin walking out. Okay? Austin walking out was a little bit, was just as unprofessional, but at least it was before a show took place where he was advertised. You know what I mean? With Sasha and Naomi, it was during a show where they were advertised, which is pretty bad. That's a black eye, and that's pretty low of them to do that. But I'm gonna go on record to say that what they did wasn't the worst thing in the world. It really wasn't. It wasn't the worst thing in the world because at least they weren't hurting anybody. At least they weren't truly going into business for themselves. And at least they weren't going on social media and then bad-mouthing WWE about it. You know what I mean? Because but they're also, like Solomonster says, they're also delusional to think that this is going to cause any real change in how WWE looks at their performers, because WWE only cares about 3 of them. You know what I mean? So it's whatever. Here's what, if Sasha and Naomi really wanted to do something, and they really wanted to get people to go okay, yeah, we see what you're doing now, they would have worked the match and they would have just went into business for themselves completely. They would have like everyone there. They would have done what New Jack is, and rest in peace, New Jack. They would have done what New Jack was known for, and something that transcended his gimmick, to where that was not New Jack doing what he was doing. That was Jerome Young doing that stuff, which was completely going to business for himself. And New Jack made a living doing that, to where he probably made more money. He probably made a better living doing press than wrestling. He probably made a better living, New Jack did, doing press in the last half of his life than working matches during the first half of his life. Okay? And if Sasha and Naomi really wanted solidarity, and they really wanted to make a stand, and they really wanted to stick it to WWE, then they would have done that match as scheduled, and they would have grabbed weapons, and they would have just beat the shit out of everybody, like unprotected chair shots and other gruesome stuff. You know what I mean? And they would have been and then they would have gotten on the microphone and say, "This is what we think of WWE. We're going into business for ourselves, and if you guys want to fire us, go right the fuck ahead, because we don't give a flying shit." You know what I mean? And we'll see you on Dynamite. You know? That is what would have caused a real stir with WWE. And even that's a stretch to say. Okay? So yeah. So what do I think the future is gonna hold for Sasha Banks and Naomi? Again, I believe, and I'm kind of betting on this, and I'm not gonna say what I was saying 20 years ago when all my buddies were like, "Oh my God, did you hear about Austin?" I remember that when I said that. I remember that when that happened, when Austin walked out. I said, "Yeah, he'll be back by like he'll be a surprise entrant in the 2003 Rumble." That's what I thought was gonna happen. I thought it was all kayfabe. You know what I mean? I thought like, oh, he got kayfabe injured, or maybe he got an actual injury and needed to get some, and needed to rehab something like Triple H did in May of '01. That's what I thought was happening. And then the less I saw Austin on TV, I'm like, oh shit. And then when I saw the Confidential episode, I was like, oh. But then after, I'm like, you know what? This is a guy who like was WWE's bottom line. Pun intended. Huh. And I'm like, you know what? Nah, he's coming back at the 2003 Rumble. And I'm gonna say with maybe a 2/3 to 3/4% certainty, 3/4%, with a 66% to 75% certainty. Let's use Steiner math here, right? That both of these young women are going to be back, and they're going to come back at the 2023 Rumble. When their contract comes up, which I think is in like either July or August or September or something like that. I think either McMahon or Laurinaitis or Pritchard or Dunn or any of the really higher ups in WWE are going to like sit and have a very long chat with both of them and say, what can we do to make this right? Because we did you wrong, and I think now we feel responsible for you walking out. If they value them. If they're valued as such. Which, considering their history, like I said, way back in the beginning of this video, considering their history, they are probably valued, And they'll have a nice come to Jesus conversation and say, what can we do to make this right? If you want to go to AEW or NWA or Impact, you go right ahead. But we think you'll be way more successful as performers here in WWE. This way you can have more timeless moments. Bayley will be back by then, and then they'll use that as a selling point to Sasha. They'll be like, Bayley's back. We can have you come back with her and do your thing. Unless Sasha is that passionate, or Naomi too, unless they're that passionate about the women's tag team titles, and if they depends on what their demands are. Okay, it depends what their demands are, and then it'll be up to them. And then they'll probably say, oh, you know what? The other organizations don't really treat women tag teams that great either. And I'm right there 1,000% with Solomonster when he says that more Sasha than Naomi. That if anyone is so delusional to think that Sasha would be happier in AEW, bruh, no, bruh, she'll be cannon fodder for Thunder Rosa or Britt Baker or Chris Statlander or even Tony Storm. Now I'm so happy with what AEW is doing with Tony Storm. Or let's see, who else is that? Or Jade Cargill. They'll have Sasha versus Jade Cargill. Would be amazing, but Sasha would be dropping the fuck out of her. Would be dropping like crazy to Jade Cargill. Get real, people. So no, man, that's not gonna happen. Same with Naomi. Naomi will probably get brought back. Naomi will probably be running back by 2023 because her husband was in WWE. You know what I mean? Her drunken, alcoholic degenerate of a fucking husband. either of the Usos, both of them are friggin' alcoholic pieces of shit. That's why I don't watch any WWE TV anymore. That's why I just heard about this from podcasters. Also, with Sasha, I mean, this might actually be a crossroads for her. She might actually say, you know what? I've been offered to do some acting, and maybe I need to just go Rock's route and just, start doing acting. Same with Cena, that kind of stuff. And Sasha, I mean, the way she works too, I mean, she's what? I remember seeing her at a house show. This woman's like 4'10", weighs like 90 pounds soaking wet, man. It's insane the way she works. I mean, one day she's going to injure herself, and it's not going to be pretty. She's probably thinking about that, and she'll probably use this time to take some time off and say, you know what? Maybe I don't want wrestling anymore. Maybe I want to do what CM Punk did and take a substantial amount of time off, and then maybe come back to be like to do like a couple more matches and then retire. That kind of stuff. I'm not saying that's what Punk's doing. I'm just saying that's what Sasha might be doing. So that's how it was. That's how it is with that. Now let's see. So here's my real opinions about all this. My final opinions on it. Were Sasha and Naomi unprofessional in what they did? Yeah, they were. Was it worse than what Austin did 20 years ago? Absolutely. Was it worse than what Sasha herself did 3 years ago after WrestleMania 35? Yes. Because after Mania 35, that was after she worked the match. That was after her and Bayley jobbed to the Iconics, and apparently it's true. And this, what she did last week, is the proof of that. Is that apparently Sasha 3 years ago after Mania 35, she just showed her ass backstage, and she was like really upset that her and Bayley lost the women's tag team titles, and rightly so. I mean, if she wanted them to be relevant and she didn't get what she wanted, then you have every right to be mad about that. And she was also dealing with really shitty mental health and stuff, and that might actually be like a lifelong thing for her. And that kind of sucks if that's the case. Probably is. I mean, I'm no stranger to that too, man. I have my moments. Let me tell you. I mean, they're good now, but they weren't good 10 years ago. I'll let you know right now, bro. So, I mean, I think both women, more Sasha than Naomi. Sasha's gonna probably do a lot of reflecting on this, and she's gonna ask herself probably a few tough questions about what she wants to do, whether she wants to continue in WWE, whether she doesn't want to continue in WWE. Maybe she doesn't want to do any more wrestling at all, And I think that's something that every wrestling performer goes through, I mean, even the ones who are just, who are like good little soldiers for the brand, that kind of stuff, for WWE, and they just do what they're told. But I think a lot of them do step back and they say, yo, am I doing what I want here? Is this fun anymore? And I think both of these women, I think they were asking themselves that question, and then they got put in this match to where it made their women's tag team titles pretty much useless. And I think they asked themselves that question at the wrong time, and they said, yeah, this isn't fun anymore, and so we don't want to do this anymore, and that could be a function of Sasha Banks's compromised mental health that she probably has been dealing with. You know what I mean? Even if she did recover, no one fully recovers from really bad mental health completely. You have to kind of keep it under wraps. You have to check up on yourself a lot and do a lot of mental health checkups on yourself, and kind of be your own mental health practitioner in a way. And if you're a wrestling performer and you're traveling, I mean, they've been able to travel for the last year or so. Do you have time to do that? Probably not. And So yeah, and honestly, like, and yeah, WWE has every right to bury her or throw her under the bus and do all that kind of stuff because because Sasha did like did kind of deliver that slap in the face to WWE, and Naomi right along with her, you know. And Naomi was, it's funny, it's something like a buddy of Naomi fired a whole bunch of tweets right after this happened, right after the walkout happened, and was describing pretty much Naomi's struggle to 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 communicate properly with the matchmakers in the booking committee of WWE, and it eerily reminded me of what Ember Moon slash Athena was going through before she quit WWE. You know what I mean? So yeah, and that's, so I understand if you're not gonna like what you're doing, then, and you're supposedly an independent contractor, then you have every right to leave. I'm dealing with that right now in my writing business. About 6 or so weeks ago, I do work for a couple marketing firms, one of which I'm writing a book for, and I'm getting paid $50 an hour for, and I'm able to do that for 10 hours a week, right? And then there's one who I've done work with for the last 3 years, who I get paid $25 an hour, and I get paid like $10 a month, and I do, if I'm lucky, 8 hours a month for this other marketing firm. So I do work for the one marketing firm, the $25 an hour one. I wrote like an article for them. They didn't like it. But meanwhile, the one who I'm writing the book for enjoys everything I do. So, of course I'm going to walk out on the $25 an hour one. You're not appreciating me, no matter how long I've worked for you. It makes no difference. But as an independent contractor, I can do that. And it's why I really dislike how WWE claims that their performers are independent contractors, yet they don't treat their performers like independent contractors. And that's why I think it's kind of bullshit that Sasha and Naomi are getting punished for walking out. Because if you think they're fucking independent contractors, you can walk out on whoever the hell you want to walk out on. So yeah, that's my real opinion about it. You know what I mean? I mean, yes, WWE has the right to do that. They have the right to go ahead and say, yeah, all right, you want to walk out on us, so so now you're dead to us, practically, until we attempt to bring you back. And there's also the possibility, and in my opinion, it's a little bit more than a possibility, that Sasha and Naomi just did this just so they can get a newer contract that gives them, a better deal than their previous contract. If that's the case, that's extremely petty on them, but I don't blame them either because of the contributions they made. You know what I mean? Even if they were jobbers, enhancement talent, you know what I mean? And you're there and you're sitting there putting in 7 good minutes to make someone look good every night or every show you do. You know what I mean? And it's not like Sasha hurts anybody. The last time she legitimately hurt somebody was Paige, and that poor woman, Sasha practically retired Paige, but that was the only blemish. Isn't like Sasha's like Nia Jax, where she is pretty much like fucking that what's that one Japanese woman, Yoshiko, who almost killed a chick, or the sexy star. It's not like Sasha's like that woman, or like any of those three, or it was Evilise, I think, also did some really stupid shit. And Naomi, I haven't heard a single bad word about Naomi, none. I haven't heard anything bad about anything that she's done. No drug problems, no attitude problems backstage. She hasn't tried to kill anybody in the ring. None of that shit. So these are good workers who know their worth. And if walking out is their way of saying, yo, like, pay attention to us and take us seriously, then guess what? I'm right there with them. I'll go to bat for them more for them to do that, for them doing that, than them thinking that this is going to somehow make WWE try to get their performers more involved in their storylines or their characters or their gimmicks or whatever. You know what I mean? Because if there's anybody I respect like completely and like as people, it's individuals who know their worth, who know that they're being shit on, and who do something about it. That's what I truly applaud. I don't applaud anybody who is like who's like a coward about it, who says, "Oh, I'm not getting treated right, but it's okay. I'll just roll with it," even though you're like capable of so much better, you know. So if Sasha and Naomi walked out because of that, because they know that they're worth better and they're gonna stick it to WWE for that reason, then they got 1,000% of my support, because that's how it should be. That's how you should be doing business. That's how you should be doing business. But WWE doesn't care about that anymore, because WWE, and this is the last few minutes, because WWE, for the last 15 or so years, hasn't needed fans. They literally have not needed fans since like 2006, 2007. Okay? They really don't. They get more money from TV deals, from charities. What do you think Tribute to the Troops was? What do you think WWE didn't have an incentive to do Tribute to the Troops? Bro, you must be out of your mind if you think they didn't have that kind of incentive. If you think that Vince McMahon didn't look at the war, if you think Vince McMahon didn't look at the Iraq War from that started and said, "Well, we can give them a slice of Americana," as he said. Fucking hate his stupid terms. What do you think, WWE didn't want to make a buck off that? Come on now, bro. That kind of stuff. The Make-A-Wish and Komen and sweet Saudi money, and I also call it Killer Komen money, because Komen doesn't give a flying fuck about breast cancer. Are you kidding me? That kind of stuff. And let's see, what else? Yeah, like it says, from the Saudis to do their stupid little Saudi shows that everyone fucking hates. That kind of stuff. They make more money off of that than any fan who buys any kind of merch, who buys any kind of ticket. The proof of this, the proof of this, is how WWE actually grew during the pandemic. You know what I mean? So WWE doesn't need to treat their performers right at all. They only need to treat a couple of them right. If Sasha Banks and Naomi knew that and didn't appreciate that and walked out to show that, then I applaud them, because their history is as performers is fantastic. Okay, Naomi doesn't go out there and hurt anybody. Sasha Banks hurt Paige that one time, and I guess that one time could also account for the several times that Nia Jax has done that kind of shit. But not me, because Paige had issues earlier, anyways, because she'd been wrestling since she was like fucking 12 years old. So, she probably wanted to retire before 30. You know what I mean? So, that's my deal with it. That's my opinion about it. And I really want Sasha and Naomi to still like do good work in any organization they wind up in after that. I don't want them to be blacklisted. There's the final thing I'll talk about. So does this mean that Sasha Banks and Naomi are going to be blacklisted? My short answer to this is no. My long answer to this is it depends on how they worked over the last 2 or so years. If it's been revealed that Sasha and Naomi had really horrible attitude problems backstage over the last couple of years or so, or if they actually hurt somebody but whoever they hurt didn't want to speak out about it because they didn't want to speak out against individuals as established as Sasha and Naomi. And if all that stuff gets leaked out, just like with what's her name, Tessa Blanchard, like Tessa Blanchard is pretty much blacklisted from everywhere because she's an asshole. You know what I mean? Like she's like the closest thing to being Nia Jax without actually being Nia Jax. Like bro, like, and I say this as a fan of Tessa Blanchard. You know what I mean? Who's actually extremely disappointed in how she's been conducting herself. That kind of stuff. So if it comes out where whoever Sasha and Naomi worked with over the last 2-3 years didn't like working with them, now WWE's gonna be like, yeah, don't come back. Bye. Peace. See you. Fuck off. You know what I mean? But I don't think that's gonna be the case at all because of how long these two girls have been in WWE. You know what I mean? So yeah, like that's the deal. Sorry if I rambled a little bit. I tend to talk in circles when it comes to stuff like this. But to those who think that this is going to change anything in WWE, yeah, like, don't hold your damn breath, kid. Don't hold your damn breath, man. Nothing's going to change, dude. I know you want change. I know. But ain't going to happen. Sorry. Nope. And to those who think that think that they're unprofessional and real stupid, yeah, fair enough. But it's like I said, they have both of these women have a really good background. Ain't like they're completely unprofessional. Ain't like they're hurting motherfuckers. Ain't like they have really bad attitude problems backstage. Ain't like they're it ain't like they're going out of their way to go into business for themselves to get their own shit in during matches. You know what I mean? Neither of them have done that, whether in televised matches or at house shows. Okay? So, yeah. Alright. So that's my opinion on all that. This was fun to do. And my final prediction on Sasha and Naomi, both of them are going to come back at Royal Rumble 2023. I think I'm saying that with like I said, about 66% to 75% certainty. Is that WWE is going to sit and negotiate with them really hard and be like, yo, we don't want you to leave. We don't want you to leave permanently. We want to punish you for a little bit, but we'll give you more. We'll give you a higher percentage of royalties on your merch. We'll make more merch for you, and we'll try to make the women's tag titles mean something. Maybe that's if they're valued enough. Okay, it rests on that. So yeah, all right, I'm out of here. Thank you for listening. I don't know when my next Remembers video is going to be. Probably in July. And we'll celebrate 10 years of Raw 1000. I think that'll be really cool. Yeah, so that'll be in July. Cause this was, I was going to cover June's Joseph Remembers with Austin walking out. But I did here. So I kind of compared the two anyways. So there you go. All right. Take care, everybody.